The reporter in me still wanted to find out why my participants in group intention were having these amazing effects. So I was thrilled when Dr. Guy Reekman, president of Life University, the world's largest chiropractic university, suggested that his psychology and neuroscience division launch a series of studies of our Power of Eight groups. He put me in touch with Dr. Stephanie Sullivan. She is a neuroscientist and director of the Dr. Sid E. Williams Center for Chiropractic Research. Dr. Sullivan and her team examined the brain patterns of one of the intenders via a QEEG, or quantitative electroencephalogram. This is standard equipment for measuring different brainwave patterns. We decided we'd measure our participants' brain patterns before, during, and after the group intention. I spoke with Dr. Sullivan via Skype to tell us about the results of the experiment. So you're a neuroscientist and you measure brain waves with a thing called a QEEG. Could you explain a little bit about what that is?
Absolutely. So basically, we place electrodes on the scalp of our study participants, and this allows us to assess the electrical activity going on just underneath the skin. And then through a complicated set of mathematical formulas, then it allows us to see quantitatively the changes in the voltage that's occurring. So where before, if you've seen some of the tracings and it just kind of shows the squiggly lines, the quantitative aspect of it allows us to really get to the numbers and makes it something usable that we can do for research purposes. And it especially narrows down the different bands, like the alpha band, the beta band, and the theta band, and even down to delta, which is those areas of deep sleep.
So in other words, you're looking at different brainwave speeds.
Exactly.
So delta are very slow, and then alpha are sort of the level for meditation, and beta are ordinary waking consciousness, and then gamma when we're really, really focused on something. And you're looking at the percentage of those brainwave patterns that we have?
Right. So we're really looking at the changes in the brainwave patterns from a numerical basis, both before the individual went through the intention process and then after the individual went through the intention process.
And you're also looking at where you've got the most activity, or whether there's any kind of quieting down of activity in different parts of the brain, the frontal lobes, the temporal lobes, the parietal lobes, things like that, right?
Exactly. So we have several different leads that go on the scalp. We actually use 19 channels with our research, and that allows us to look at what's going on in the left parietal, the right parietal, getting down into the different areas of the temporal lobe and the frontal lobes. So we can get a bigger picture for whether or not those changes in electrical activity are going up or they're going down. What we really wanted to do is have the individuals who were our QEEG participants never have participated in this type of intention or this type of meditative practice before, where they're sending some form of healing perception to another individual. So we wanted to keep them as novice as possible.
What happened? What were the results? What did you find?
So honestly, we found some pretty amazing results. Now, qualifying that, and that this was a case series where we only had 6 individuals that we were looking at. But to be honest, it was amazing. Across the board, we had one participant that varied slightly, but everyone else actually had a decrease in their frontal lobe, their parietal lobe, and their temporal lobe, and with some additional decrease in their occipital lobe. And all of this was on the right side of their brain. And of course, my natural thought is that, okay, this is going to look like meditation. So I was honestly surprised when it didn't look like the traditional meditation studies that we've seen where there was an increase in alpha. So, and ours decreased, honestly.
What about the frontal lobes? Now, and the right frontal lobes, what does that part of the brain do?
So your frontal lobes, especially, They're really involved in your executive function, or what individuals call executive function skills. These are your planning tasks, your logical thinking, and there's actually a close link to your emotional centers of your brain and then your attention centers, which there's a nice link between your frontal lobes and your right parietal lobes in particular for regulating your ability to sustain attention. And we even seen in this study some increased coherence between your frontal and your parietal. So those brain regions are really starting to connect and almost talk at more of a sustained level.
That right frontal lobe, too, also is connected to things like worry, doubt, fear, those kinds of things, right?
Right. Oftentimes your right frontal lobe in particular is that area of the brain where there is fear and anxiety. A lot of people equate it with just those happy emotions and the creative side, but your right side of your brain actually has kind of a dark side too. So if you're looking at the anxiety and the fear, then sometimes that's coming from your right frontal lobe in particular. Um, but what was interesting is our study participants actually decreased in their activation of their frontal lobe, not only in the alpha waves, but the beta as well. So
And that would suggest that there was a tuning down of things like fear, worry, doubt, perhaps.
you could potentially extrapolate that based on some previous research.
Now,
So,
what about the temporal lobes? What are they for?
so your temporal lobes, not only most people think of it as um, processing sound, but there's actually a lot more to it. So deep inside your temporal lobe, you've of course got your hippocampus, and you have a lot of your memory centers within your hippocampus. But it also processes visual information as well. So it's visual, it's auditory, and it's memory. So, and it works closely with your parietal lobe also. I honestly was surprised that there was a decrease in both the temporal and occipital lobes. So, given that, especially since I suspect a lot of them were more visual.
Now, you said you were surprised. What surprised you? Was it just this thing about not being like meditation research, or was there something more?
I was surprised by the degree of difference and the fact that it was across the board exempting the one individual. So that was surprising. And to be to be honest, as I was sitting in the groups, there are always things in science that you see and observe but you can't measure. And there were palpable differences in the individuals and the group dynamics after the intention session. And literally the individuals only spent a few minutes getting to know each other and telling something interesting about themselves. So I was surprised after the experiment, the difference in the dynamic of the group. I mean, there was hugging, there was caring. It palpable is the best way to describe it.
As a scientist, you say, yeah, we always want more research. So we have more research planned for the Power of Eight groups. Do you want to speak about that?
We're bringing individuals together that are doing these intention groups and see where they grow together as a group and as senders. And over 8 weeks, are we changing their physiology and seeing what happens to them?